joined this afternoon by Karen Collins from Aware. Karen, thanks for your time and really looking forward to what you have to share with us. I wonder just before we kick off with some questions about employees and employers and mental health, could you tell us a little bit about the organisation that you work with?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Mark, for inviting me to take part this afternoon. It's lovely to chat with you. As you say, I work with Aware. For anyone that isn't familiar with the organisation, Aware is the depression charity for Northern Ireland. So we have a focus specifically on supporting individuals who are affected by depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder. And by people affected, that can be the individual themselves that's experiencing some difficulties with their mental health, or it can be a friend, family member, or carer that needs some guidance on supporting that individual. So in normal times, what that means is we primarily provide a network of support groups for individuals that are affected by depression, where folks can come along and get some peer support and guidance on how others have managed with the illness. And we also provide a suite of education and training programs to help the general population learn more about mental health and how they can look after and improve their own mental health.
Great, thanks for that. And Karen, in these strange times that we find ourselves in with this coronavirus pandemic and lockdown, and then beginning to think about moving out of lockdown and all that entails, there's particular challenges for employers and employees. Can you say a few words just for in relation to employees that are on furlough, and maybe some things that they might be thinking about around just some of the isolation of that, and what an employer can maybe be thinking of in relation to supporting employees on furlough, in terms of staying in touch and that sort of thing. So what should an employer with employees on furlough be thinking about in terms of supporting those employees while they're not at work?
Sure. Well, I think first of all, you've used the word isolation, and that's actually a really important word to think about. We have gone from a situation of being very sociable, both inside and outside work, to being in this very strange environment of having very limited contact with people. And isolation is a huge factor of that. And we know that isolation can lead for many to symptoms of depression and anxiety where they have previously never had any experience of mental ill health. So we do know that there's a significant increase in individuals experiencing depression and anxiety for the first time during this. So that's something for employers to keep in their mind, that they may well have employees with new mental ill health symptoms that hasn't occurred for them before. And how do they work with that? How do they support that? So I think encouraging employers to be aware of that and to open up a space and a conversation with their employees about that. It may not be within your culture. You may be very focused on physical well-being of your staff, and we're all very tuned into physical health and safety of our staff. But actually, this is a prime opportunity, if you've never done it before, to start thinking about the mental health of your employees. So being quite upfront about recognizing the mental ill health that can come out of isolation, and creating the space to talk about that. For employers to know a little bit more about education and training programs, and learning a little bit about mental ill health themselves, and being able to signpost their employees to sources of support. So obviously, ourselves at Aware, we're providing a wide range of education programs, of online learning tools, of mindfulness sessions, and various things like that that are free of charge, that we can signpost employers and employees towards. And what those do is just help us all learn a little bit more about our mental health, reassure us that how we might be feeling at the moment is really normal and really understandable, and it's not something that necessarily is going to be with us for the rest of our lives, but there are things that we can do to address that. So there will be information within that about things that you can do on a practical level to improve your mental health.
And Karen, I think from my perspective, what I've seen sometimes is employers feel like if an employee's on furlough, it's almost like you can't speak to them. But of course, there's a difference between doing work, which you're not allowed to do when you're on furlough, and just keeping some sort of contact. So even just a check-in with a phone call or a text message or something, I mean, how important can that be, just to keep that contact up?
I think it's hugely important. It's certainly one of the things that we thought about on day one of how do we keep in contact with each other. And so just to give some practical ideas, some of the things that we have done at Aware is put in place virtual tea breaks. So at 10:30 in the morning, we encourage everybody to come on to Zoom or come on to Teams and just sit and have a chat, just so they've got a check-in point during the day. And it's not to talk about work. I'm sure there's always bits of work conversation comes up for those of us who are working, but for folks that are on furlough, it's just an opportunity to get in contact. Myself as chief executive in the organisation, I'll try and make 2 or 3 phone calls at least to selected employees during the week, just to check in with them, say hello, ask how they're getting on, if they need any support, and that kind of thing. And then also just wee practical things like making sure that folks that are on furlough don't feel that they're ostracised from the organisation. And there is a level of information that's helpful for them to be up to date with. Like for us, we're adapting services every day in the changing environment. So our staff do get a regular email update from myself to say this is what's going on, just so you know, just so you're aware of what's going on there. So that keeping in touch is really important. Again, because people don't have the same social networks that we normally have, just getting a phone call from a work colleague or an email or that kind of virtual tea break idea, or just some fun activities as well, an online quiz that we've all been doing with our families, doing those in a work context as well. It's really valuable.
That's great. And I think from our perspective as well, what we're seeing is that when employers are ready to have employees to come back off furlough, it's an easier transition back into work if there's been some contact during that period. And in fact, from the employer's perspective, I think they can be made aware of any issues that might cause an employee difficulty coming back from furlough if they've been in touch with them, and really to have no contact for a month and then ring up and say I want you back tomorrow. There's a better way to do that, I think, in terms of being in touch in that interim period. But Karen, of course, not everybody's on furlough, far from it. So what about some of the particular challenges that people are facing who are in work currently? I'm thinking around people who are maybe balancing trying to work with children not being at school, or working but being anxious that when they're out and about working, that they're potentially bringing coronavirus back home into their home when they live with someone who's particularly vulnerable or shielding. So what are some of the anxieties there around people working, and what could employers do to provide some reassurance and to protect the mental health of employees who are anxious about working at the minute?
Yeah, and I suppose there's 2 key sides to this. We've got employees who need to be in their place of work and physically engaged with other people, and for them, the health and safety concerns, that reassurance about the measures that the employer has put in place to safeguard them, that they are adhering to all of the government guidelines and the social distancing is really, really important. But also, if you're in work and you're having to engage with other people, to feel that it's okay to raise any concerns with your employer is really valuable. So I'm sitting in an office environment or in a production line or whatever, and I'm in close contact and I'm feeling really anxious about it. It's hugely important to be able to relay that to my employer, and hopefully for the employer to be able to reach some kind of accommodation with me about what we can do to ease that anxiety. So I give an example from our own workplace. Whenever this kicked off, it was very obvious that there were a couple of employees who were much more anxious about being in the work environment than others, because they had maybe vulnerable people in their home that they were, exactly as you say, concerned about taking the virus home to. So for us as an employer, one of the things we wanted to do was enable that remote working for them as quickly as possible. And that for them really helped their anxiety levels. So we felt it was a really important step in looking after their emotional well-being. It also helped their productivity. They were relaxed at home, they were much more comfortable, they could do their work effectively. Of course, that's not possible for everybody. The type of work that we do, a lot of it is possible to do remotely, but for others that isn't the case. But I think that flexibility is really important. Secondly, then the second side of that being those who can work from home, I think it's so important for employers to recognise that what you can do from home and what you can do from the office is not necessarily the same thing, especially if you've got young kids or you've got other caring responsibilities. A lot of parents that are home at the moment, maybe 2 parents trying to work full time and looking after kids. I'm in that boat. It's not easy. And so for employers just to recognise that you can't maybe be fully productive, or that you certainly need a large amount of flexibility about the hours that you're working. I find that that's relieving a lot of stress for our staff, or we can offer that, or we can say, if you need to work in the evening or in the morning, earlier in the morning, whenever you don't normally, that's fine. Work the arrangements around your personal situation as well. So as much flexibility as is possible can really help alleviate a lot of the pressure and the stress that people are feeling under at the moment. And there has been a survey done that says that 50% of parents that are caring for children have got raised levels of stress and anxiety. So there's a strong correlation there, and anything we can do to steady employees, like you can have much more flexibility than you normally would. We understand what you're going through, and just meeting some accommodations there where that's possible is really important.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And Karen, can you say a word for employers as well? So it's right and proper that employers focus on their employees' health and safety, including their mental health. But a lot of employers are carrying a lot of burden around at the minute in relation to their own businesses and livelihoods, and also feeling very responsible for employees' jobs at an uncertain time. So where can an employer go for some support in relation to their own mental health at this time?
Yeah. Okay. A couple of brief things I'll touch on, and then I'm going to refer you to a few websites. First of all, I think it's really important for employers to recognise what they can control themselves and what they can't. We are in a bizarre situation, and a lot of things are outside of our control, and we are inclined to take on pressure to solve everything and try and resolve it ourselves. So one of the things that we often would encourage people to think about is worry about the things that you can control and change yourself, and try and set the rest of it aside, because you can't change that, and worrying about it is only going to cause you undue anxiety. And that's not to be cavalier about it or ignore it, but just to be sensible about what you can actually do something about yourself. And then looking at sources of support for yourself. You, of course, have a huge responsibility for your employees. And there's some top tips that are on our website that we would encourage to have a look at in terms of looking after your own mental health and that of your employees. But think about your own sources of support. Have you got a good senior management team that you can discuss and you can talk to, and you've got a level of friendship with that you can maybe draw on resource for? Have you got a great HR advisor in the background who can give you some advice? Have you got contact with an organisation like Aware or some of the other charities that can provide a listening ear? But you need to have some sources of support yourself. You need to have some outlets to talk about what's worrying you and to help you get through those as well. And then looking at those kind of top tips for looking after your mental health. So some of those top tips are really practical things like connecting with other people, having some conversation, having some downtime, getting some exercise, getting out into the fresh air, doing something that you enjoy that gives you some pleasure and is separate from work, and even continuing to learn. So opportunities for learning and to develop our skills, and that can give us a real sense of satisfaction and is really positive for our mental health. So thinking about the things that stress you and what will help you to alleviate that, and looking after that first and foremost, because you can't help your employees if you're not in a good state yourself. And then when you're needing those sources of support, our website is a good place to start for that, aware-ni.org. There are lots of self-help resources on there. We also have a helpline, a telephone helpline that folks can ring up and seek support. We've got some online support groups that are happening at the moment. So there's a wide variety of tools there, both for employers and employees, that are really helpful at this time.
Great, Karen, thanks for that. And then when we're sending out this video, then we'll put a few links to those helpful resources along with that then, so that people can follow up on that. Karen,
Okay.
really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thanks for taking the time out to talk to us, and I really hope that those that watch this will gain great benefit from it. So Karen Collins, Chief Executive of Aware, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.